understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time. Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. Today, we will be discussing building a culture of privacy and software development. I'm joined by my great guest, Jason Reiser. How are you doing today, Jason?
Doing great, Namdi. Good to see you again. It's been a while. How you been?
I've been doing very, very well. It's good to see you too, my friend. So I'm really excited for the show. Jason, I'm going to read his bio so you can get to know him better. I've known Jason for quite a long time, and it's really great talking to him in this capacity. So before I get into it, let's just do some housekeeping things for Tech Behind FinTech. One, we're streaming live from Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch. We also have a stream going from the Instagram Tech Behind FinTech page, and also another stream going from my personal Instagram page. We have a bunch of streams going. If you want to be part of the show, and you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, you can add a comment and we will post a comment to the show. Now, without further ado, the topic for the show, as I mentioned, building a culture of privacy and software development. So let me get into Jason's bio. Jason Reiser is a technology lawyer who practiced in fintech space for nearly 2 decades. First as a lawyer in a national firm, and then as general counsel of a SaaS company focused in the financial planning and wealth management space. During this time, Jason was responsible for negotiating all types of SaaS agreements, overseeing enterprise risk programs, developing and maintaining robust data privacy programs, ensuring regulatory compliance, and facilitating a variety of data aggregation API relationships with large financial institutions. Jason received his Bachelor of Arts in Economics from Buckner University and his Juris Doctor from Rutgers University. In addition, in 2023, Jason received his Master's of Science in Technology Leadership from Brown University to further augment his skills in the technology sector. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, I'm old. I've been around for a while.
Yeah, age is a state of mind these days.
That's
man.
right. That's right.
So you have to stay active and things of that nature. But really good stuff, man. Privacy. Before we get into privacy, just for the audience to understand, can we define what is privacy?
Yeah. So most people think of security, right? They think like, don't let me in the gate. So the gate behind me, right? Keep the locks on. That's cybersecurity. That's more your world, right? How do I protect what I have? Privacy is forget the gate. What are we doing with what's the stuff that we have? How do we treat it? How do we share it? How do we consume it? And what do we do with it when we're done? And the biggest component of that is what does the person who's giving you all this information know about what you intend to do with it? So you have an idea of a concept called consent or informed consent around uses of data. So, the old days, privacy was really regulated to certain niche sectors, the federal government, like HIPAA. Everybody knows about HIPAA, right? Everybody thinks everything about healthcare is HIPAA, and that's not true, but that's how people thought about it. And now we have a lot more state regulations coming into play that are affecting just regular, normal businesses that have nothing to do with a particular industry, because let's face it, every company today is a data company, whether you know it or not. Data is being consumed, by the millisecond, and in many cases, our data is the product. So if you think of Facebook, Instagram, any social media, and beyond, if it's free, that means you are the product and you are being consumed, right? So privacy is what is being done with all that data that you provide to a company or a provider.
No, that's an excellent overview, and you're right. Some people, when they hear privacy, they automatically put it on cybersecurity. I think it's in the same family per se, but in terms of the data and what you consent for instance, you start looking at the EU, where like GDPR is huge, and open banking and things of that nature. And I think from a privacy standpoint, like those start coming into play. Can we talk about some sort of, you mentioned regulations in the US that has to deal with privacy. Can you elaborate on some of them?
Yeah. So again, historically, if you go back even 20 years, you had federal laws either around healthcare, around financial services, the GLBA, children's privacy, all these little silos, right? And if you weren't sort of affected directly by them, then it didn't apply to you. Then Europe, about 6 or 7 years ago, came out with the GDPR, which is, and Europe is interesting. Europe is always more, and some people hate this word, but progressive about what we'll call human rights, or the rights of the individual. They're much more aggressive in enforcing them, whereas the United States is much more of a bargain, right? I'll give you money for something, I'll give you my content for something in exchange for the service. In Europe, it's a much more narrowly defined relationship. So GDPR came out, and it treats privacy as a human right. So you can think of a right to free speech, a right to move, across where you live, to marry somebody, whatever it is. Privacy is considered a human right. United States, it's always been considered a bargain for right? It's a commodity. Up until California law came out in 2020, the CCPA. That was the first attempt, and not surprising, came from California, which is the most European-like state we have in many ways. Made the first attempt to rein in the use of personal data by companies. And since then, and by the way, that law came about not because of a governor or legislature, but it was a referendum. So California has a strange mechanism where you can get enough votes to put a law on a ballot. And if it gets voted in, then it becomes a law. And then the state has to figure out how to enforce it. So it's a very backwards way of doing it, but they got it onto the books. And that law has been further refined by the CPRA. And since then, there's been about 4 or 5 or close to direct copycats of that law, and probably 10 others that are in the weeds coming out soon. So we have at least 8 or 9 active or semi-active state laws that are starting to get more granular on how companies have to treat the sensitive data that they consume from their users.
Can you help me out with something? I know, especially with the CCPA, right? So, and correct me where I'm wrong, because I want to make sure I understand this correctly. Sometimes people think it's only if you are a business in California. From my understanding is now, if you're doing business with California, or your data is consumed by someone living in California, whether your business is not. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah. So this is what keeps lawyers in business. Each law has its own parameters of who it applies to, and then there's exceptions, right? So California is a fairly broad one, and you're correct. So if you are a business of a certain size, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's usually, I think it's like $50 million in revenue. I could be wrong, but I believe that's the number. It could be a little bit lower. Or they usually do a size by number. And you have the data of a California resident, then the law applies. And again, I'm kind of simplifying it, but that's the basic gist of it. So you don't have to be in California. You don't have to even knowingly sort of reach out to California. But if you're taking in California residents' data, then that law will apply to you, subject to some of those parameters that I mentioned.
And I think that's important to recognize, like, regardless of the parameters in terms of the number, I think sometimes in working with certain fintechs or different organizations, they feel, well, we're not a California-based company. This is not one of the regulatory standards that we have to abide by. But, it's very important to note that if you fit within the parameters, even if you're not, you still can come under that regulatory umbrella. So it's important that you have certain things in place to monitor and adhere to that sort of compliance. All right, so that's good. In general, okay, wow. We do not have a question. We have that's the problem sometimes with going live.
Yeah.
In certain streams, like you're thinking it's a question, and no, it's somebody trying to solicit something or whatever. Yeah. So skipping over that question, and I'm going to go back to like some of my questions. The next, right? You start talking now about privacy and building it into the software development cycle. What do you mean by that?
So the problem that is already here, but it's coming to be more of an issue is we have all these, so we have these federal laws that apply to industries in certain situations. Then we have these state laws. There's 6 or 7 sort of active, and there's, like I said, 7 or 8 more coming. How are you supposed to keep track of them all, right? Because there's not, the ideal from a ease of maintenance perspective would be for a federal law to exist, right? And we would just have the Congress say, okay, here's a federal privacy law like GDPR, or the Japanese law, the Australian laws, and it just covers the whole country. So we don't need all these state laws. But I've been in some meetings discussing some of these proposals that have come out, and we're a ways away. So you're left with this quilt, right? This patchwork of laws that cover you or don't cover you, and they change, they get amended, and nobody's sending you like notifications, right? You have to keep on top of this yourself. So you either you have to hire some privacy experts, whether they're lawyers or just privacy experts. But if you're a technology company and you are consuming data, you have to work extra hard, especially if you're an established company that's been around for 15 or 20 years, and you started your business when there was basically no privacy laws to worry about. So how do you get on top of both keeping your business going, growing your business, innovating, but being compliant when you have these laws that are getting more and more both numerous, and they have the bigger teeth that can really hurt you if you mess up? So it's a long prelude to say the easiest way to do it is to what they call shift left, right? So shift your focus on privacy to the beginning of your software development lifecycle, as opposed to patching it on at the end in a reactive way. So, for example, very simple example. Let's say when a person comes to your application, your website, on your phone, they enter in their phone number and name. We'll just keep it real easy, okay? Why do you need the phone number? Well, you want the phone number maybe to establish two-factor authentication, speaking from your world, right? But you probably want it because you want contact information, right? You want to be able to reach out to them. So where does that phone number go in your stack? Does it go into your CRM system that you can manage all of your clients with? Okay, that's a legitimate spot that way your marketing team or your sales team can use it to reach out. Where else is that phone number going? Is it being fed into other technology flows in your company unknowingly, right? Or without a reason? And does the consumer know that? So it's all these intertwining questions and vectors that are starting to come up. Just using that very simple example, you might be doing that for 2 years until somebody goes, "Why are these phone numbers sitting over in this, in this part of the tech stack?" And they go, "I don't know." Just because it was unintentionally done because of the way the architecture was set up 10 years ago. And now you have a problem where you've been storing and potentially sharing phone numbers of individuals with their names, maybe some other information. And now you might have a compliance issue. And now you got to go hire the lawyers or the experts to untangle what you've done, and figure out if it causes a problem. And now you need to self-report to a attorney general in some state. And guess what? Your competitors find out you're now subject to an investigation of the attorney general. What are they going to do with that, right? So it's just this cascading issue. So coming back to the left, to the beginning, if you create your software and develop architecture software in a way that accounts for data uses and make sure that it's okay to use data as long as people are aware of it and you do what you say you're going to do, and you get rid of it when you don't need it anymore. If you do those things, you're generally okay. But if you're doing it at the end, it's too late. It's too expensive, and well, guess what? People just don't do it.
I mean, it's interesting that you use the term shift left. One of the things, offline, well, not offline, but that I specialize in, we talk a lot about shift left in something called DevSecOps. So we talk about application security, and it's really, how do we start applying certain security measures even before development starts? So you can start out in the threat modeling space. So you could just start identifying all these different potential attack vectors in your application and different gates that you want to put in, different tests that you want to run. And now you start, when you start looking at all of these things early on in the phase and you do your threat modeling, you start putting that into your backlog. So in the agile methodology process, you have like a backlog and you run sprints. So what it sounds like from a privacy perspective is similar in nature. It's like we're looking at our architecture, we're designing, the business model and what we want to put in, and now we're saying, not in addition to security, let's start talking about privacy. When we get the customer data or we get inflows from one of our banking partners and their data, where's that data going? How long is it going to live? When is it going to be erased? What is it going to be used for? And accounting to all of these things early on in the process, from what you're saying, will save us tons of not only money, but aggravation by doing it and bolting it on later on. Is that correct?
It's absolutely the same concept. And and again, it's easy. If I was starting a company today, okay, no problem, right? I will include in the definition of done a privacy component, like a cybersecurity component, like every other business feature that you need to have to make a successful delivery of that sprint, of that cycle, of that iteration, of that dot, right? Whatever you're doing, privacy is part of it. Now, the problem becomes you have companies, like I said, who are 10, 15, 20 years old that were created in a time when either privacy laws didn't exist, or they were following that sort of Zuckerberg thing of, build fast and break things, because you want to get sort of critical mass before you worry about everything else and you're too big to fail, right? That's sort of that older concept. And what you're seeing today, both in the venture capital market, private equity markets, and even in robust companies, that are more established, is that it's no longer good enough to have a high user count as a metric of success. We've seen too many, this past year has been like the year of startups of shutting down, and not necessarily for privacy or security reasons. It's because all they cared about was growth in user count, and they failed sort of the elemental issues. So it's really important that if you are a more mature company, or one starting out, but you have to find a way to tackle this, and you have to sort of reorient that's why we talk about a culture of privacy. It doesn't mean privacy is in the front, it doesn't run the business. I get that, but you have to develop a culture of privacy where it's not just one or two people's job to check what you're doing, because that creates an antagonism, and it's always like, okay, here come the privacy people, right? It's just like, here come the cyber people or the IT people. You don't want that. You want to working as a team where you all sort of understand the basic table stakes, so that when you move forward, it's much more naturally aligned to the business goals without having to always tear up the hood and rip out hoses and put new ones in. To use a terrible analogy.
Now I'm all about terrible analogy, so it's all good. So, but here's the thing. Sometimes, the actions are predicated on the repercussions, right?
Right.
So, and I want to get back into it. You mentioned the Attorney General, you mentioned an investigation. What are some of the repercussions of, not meeting the regulatory standards for privacy if found out or exposed? And, the next follow-up question is, how would someone get exposed, right? It's like, my data is behind this shield. Like, no one knows that it's on a random database that we no longer access. Like, that's our internal people know that. So let's just start with the first question. What are some of the repercussions in terms of fines or in terms of brand or whatever?
Yeah. So, when I counsel businesses, my first step is like, forget the fines and forget the penalties for the moment, because they can be substantial. But what you're really going to face is two things. One is reputational risk, like you alluded to. If there's two or three big players in the industry and one is under investigation, then those other two suddenly look much better, right? You might be the leader you might be cheaper, you might be more advanced, but if you have a choice between somebody under investigation, even if it's not, for a good cause, but it just is, and that's trumpeted, you're going to go somewhere else. But secondly, and this is always the counter argument I have to people say, well, it's too expensive, it takes too much time, it slows us down to stop and fix things. Well, if you get caught or you're under investigation, guess what? Now you're doing it, but you're doing it under the watchful eyes of an attorney general's office, right? Who can come in to your office virtually or in reality and start poking around. And how disruptive is that going to be, right? Because now you're fixing, you're fixing the tire while the car's moving, right? And being judged for it. So if you go now to fines, so you can, different states are different. Again, they're all different. Sometimes it can be a percentage of revenue, can be attacked. Sometimes they're just more like dollar figures. Some states have a private right of action, so you can be sued by a civil attorney saying, "Hey, you're violating the law, and if the attorney general's not coming after you, I'm going to." So now you have to face class action potentially, right? And those are trumpeted across your inbox all the time. Have you been a customer of? Have you been subject to this? So it's just enormously disruptive to have to go through even a minor investigation that's not on the headlines. And I can tell you like a couple examples. So like Uber, and this Uber is the first company that I'm aware of that had a directive from the Department of Justice that it had to institute a privacy by design program, because when Uber was created, it was freewheeling. The original CEO founder was just grow. They got a ton of trouble for a variety of issues that they were doing. The sensitive information they were getting from their users, driver's license number, et cetera, like that, they were not protecting, and they got a huge amount of trouble. Now, Uber was kind of lucky because it was just early enough that it was before all these state laws came into place, but they got in trouble by the federal government. So, that's an easy example. But they had an order from the court saying you have to do all these things to become compliant, or you're going to be shut down. It's an extreme example, but those are some of the things you can face.
Okay. Now the next question is, it's so funny. There was like a social media meme, and it goes like, how would they know? Maybe like, how would they know? They kept asking. So that's the question I have for you right now. It's like, how would they know? Like you didn't. So let me put some more color around that question. Right. You didn't get breached yet.
Yep.
So there's no data loss. Right. There's not a cybersecurity event.
Yep.
But you are not adhering to privacy standards.
Mm-hmm.
How would they know?
Okay, so a couple ways. One is with the advent of these new laws. Let's take California because it's the easiest example. California has a right to delete, right? So I can say to a California, I'm a California resident. Company has my data. They otherwise qualify under the law. So I send I call it DSARC, Data Subject Access Request. Tell me what you have about me in your systems and for what purpose. So once you put that request in, the clock starts to tick. And there's a certain amount of time that the company has to analyze your request. And it can be issues that they don't respond in time. But let's say that they respond in time. And then you say to them, okay, well, delete my information, okay, from everything. And again, there's certain exceptions. So if I was a customer of that business, they'd be entitled to keep certain data about me because I'm a customer, and they have to keep certain information about me. But let's assume I wasn't a customer. Delete all my data. Okay, we're going to delete all your data. And then time goes by. Okay, Jason, we've deleted all your data. Great. 2 weeks later, I get a targeted ad sent to me saying, "Oh, you like our stuff, buy it." Well, I thought, how did they get a hold of me? They're supposed to delete my data. Oh, they didn't, because their marketing stack, their marketing applications didn't speak to their back end, where their CRM data or their some other data was. And so when they're doing their media campaigns, they were just sending out an old list they had, which wasn't caught in that deletion request, right? So now, and by the way, some people are, attorneys, let's say, help them with these processes, okay? Because attorneys are always poking and prodding at websites. They're looking at privacy policies, they're looking at cookies, and how they're used. That's a whole other issue we can talk about in a minute. So that's one example, okay? The company didn't do what it's supposed to do, and because of its automated processes, you found that out. That's sort of one way it could happen, right? in a very realistic way. It can happen. You're supposed to delete it and you didn't.
Can I ask a question on that real quick
Yeah.
before we move on? So, because you brought up a good example with the marketing stack. So
Yep.
you look at a lot of companies now that like startups, they're using a bunch of third-party systems to
Right.
handle all sorts of things, right? One of those third-party systems could be a SaaS-based CRM. So in your internal side, in your internal stack, which what's really internal right now because your database is in a public cloud somewhere. So, all right, but let's just take into account that. But you get this letter, right, to delete. I want you to delete my data, like you said, could be orchestrated by an attorney who wants a class action suit or whatever. So you deleted it from the servers dealing directly with your application, but it's stuck in an online CRM system somewhere that the marketing team leverages to automatically send solicitation.
Yep.
It based on your example, is the company still responsible, or is now the SaaS application responsible? Who bears the responsibility of that?
So this is like a chain, right? So you brought up a good point. So when some of these laws have come on the books, you are responsible for your vendors. Your vendor is responsible to you. But so as between the consumer, right, you are liable to the consumer. The fact that your vendor screwed up may be on you and it may be on the vendor, but that's not the consumer's problem. That's not the state law's problem. You are still on the hook. You might be able to go to them and say, okay, you cover me for the damages. But is that, that's like a very technical discussion. That doesn't help you with your reputation, doesn't help you with anything else. Doesn't help you with an unhappy customer. So part of this chain is all of your vendors that get this data. You need to map out what they're getting, what are they using, why are they using it, how long are they keeping it for, and can they destroy it when you ask them to? And that's like off the top of my head, 5 things. There's probably 5 more. So in this world, as you point out, everybody's using third parties. Nobody's homegrown, right? And so you have this tension between innovation, growth, right? Client acquisition, customer acquisition, and all the other things that go wrong. And that's, again, the example of why when you're building and architecting your stack and you need to have clear channels and you need to have dashboards that people can use, and you need to have the developers in with the privacy people, in with the business development people, in with the marketing people, in with the cybersecurity teams. It can't be siloed anymore. It's just not going to work long term.
Wow, that's really interesting. Especially the idea that someone will send this letter, or like you mentioned, it could be as a way from a legal perspective, sending, I know you're a customer here, let's sending all letters to a bunch of companies, delete my data, and then basically testing and monitoring to see if that data was really deleted. Are you getting further solicitation? And then
Yep.
if you are, you're in violation. And now that you're in violation, we have a potential case.
Yeah,
Wow.
and they can do it on like your cookies. So this is fun. So California, one of the triggers is whether you sell or share a person's data, right? And some companies say, that's okay, we don't sell the data, we just use it internally, we're safe, right? Well, you're not, because somebody visits your website, you have the cookies that attach, right? Your tracking cookies, your marketing cookies. In some instances, the use of those cookies can be considered a sale or sharing of the person's personal sensitive information. And you have to account for that. Again, it's not necessarily that you can't do it, but you have to disclose that you're doing it in a way that's compliant with that particular law. And I can tell you that's an issue with a lot of companies because they're just used to the old. So you may, about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, everybody got a wave of cookie disclosures, and that was because of GDPR. Any international company, you would just face those. Now you're seeing in the United States more is what cookies do I accept, right? Necessary, marketing, blah blah blah. That's because of these new laws that are coming out in the United States. So there's a lot of pitfalls that are available to you, and if you're not careful, or you're just sort of, again, only focus on growth and client acquisition, you're going to miss some of these.
So, all right, no, this is good. What what do you see as potential challenges in implementing the privacy-centric culture?
Cost and time are certainly issues, because again, for a mature company, you may be upending the way you've done business. There's an adversarial way to do it, which is the privacy team. Okay, let's say you want to create a new feature for your business. Your widget's always done this. Now you want to do this and this. Well, what is the impact from a privacy perspective of that widget? If you wait until it's built and you're like a week before launch and you tell the privacy team, you're going to either shut down for 2 months or a month while they figure it out, or you're going to ignore them and go ahead and do it, right? So it's very much a, hide your eyes and ears and just keep going and hoping and praying and saying, well, somebody else, we haven't got caught. There's no problem now, so why should I worry about it? And the reason is these new laws. So that's a very adversarial way to look at it, So people don't understand it, so they fear it, and they're like, well, this doesn't apply to me. We don't sell data. There's all these simplistic arguments that people make, but they don't understand sort of the flow of it. And again, I'm not saying privacy should be paramount over everything, but you can't get away in the United States anymore with the old practices, is my only point. So you're better off building a sort of privacy center of excellence or a privacy hub that brings in all the other counterparts, like the engineers, like the QA people, like the marketing people, so that you're all on the same page. And it's not always me coming into your office going, there's a problem. You got to, you can't release, like who likes doing that? I don't, you don't. So so the culture has to shift from, this is it'd be nice to be able to do that, Jason, but that's going to cost $1 million to buy the technology and time. Okay, I get that. Like, you don't have $1 million necessarily, but we can start somewhere. We can start to, an easy thing to do is, let's assess our company and figure out where all the data goes, right? What do we run on? What is the the gasoline to our engine? What's data? Okay, let's map it out, and let's start hitting the low-hanging fruit, or the most important. Get a good privacy policy up front. Fix your cookie issues. Be able to respond to data requests that come in once you determine that you're bound by those laws. They're not easy, but those are like the things you have to do, because those are the public-facing things. All the stuff behind the scenes about shifting left and integrating these teams, that can take some time, but you've got to deal with the front-facing issues that are easy for a lawyer, attorney general, whistleblower, right, to point out. And everything's captured, so you can't take that page down and just say, oh no, it didn't happen. It's out there, right? So it has to be done in a way that's business friendly, that is is considered collaborative. And I know those are words that people use a lot, but it's I've seen it go good and I've seen it not go so good, and it doesn't do anybody any help to have that sort of adversarial relationship.
So in terms of tools and technology, right, like for what we do in terms of compliance automation and helping people adhere to certain frameworks, we use a compliance automation tool. Our sponsor, Strategic Generation, that's basically one of the things they do. I'll play the commercial soon. What are some technologies, high level, from a privacy perspective, that's being used to aid in this process?
The most important, cookie banners and cookie tools, like there's a lot of quote unquote plug and play models you can get by with, but those are kind of like table stakes now. The most important one is sort of your data intelligence, your back end, something that sits on the spine of your system, and that can start to run queries and figure out where the data goes. Because if somebody does come in to say, hey, delete my data, do you have one button to press or do you have 30 buttons to press? Right? That's a big issue. And I know it's not easy to put everything onto that spine, but that's and there's a lot of companies out there that do that, that sort of can help you with that. And speak pretty well to your systems, whether it's Salesforce or something else. They speak pretty well to it. It takes time, it takes effort, but that's the most important one, I think. And then you can start to get into things like privacy scans. And there's companies out there to do that for you. That'll sort of run continuous, evolving, scans of your code itself, right? It's at the code level. This is not done at the application level. So you have to do it, and it can be continuous. The other option is this manual process where I come into your office and they say, okay, Nandi, what does this thing do that you're building? And you explain it to me, but you were missing that one day when they said they were going to put a new feature in it. So you just forgot to you didn't tell me about it because you didn't know about it. So I write down all the stuff and I go off and start to evaluate it. And then I'm like, okay, it's good to go. And then this thing is pushed and it's missing that feature that you didn't know about. And you can't do that continuously. Like you do that maybe every quarter. So there's these, privacy enhancing technologies, they're called, that help you understand what you have, how it's used, and making sure that when you do that dot change, you haven't flipped a switch accidentally that changes the whole privacy impact of that application.
Wow. That's it. So it's on the same lines as like for what we do, compliance automation tools. So I like the data intelligence side. I'm gonna also investigate some of the privacy scanners and so forth, because I think it definitely helps in the conversations I'm in to adding that value. So thanks for that. I never really thought of, I'm so embedded in the security side, just, outside of being a host of Tech Behind FinTech, of course, that privacy is something that I even took for granted. I mean, let me take that back. In a sense that when we try to move towards frameworks, and now we're helping companies with GDPR or CCPA, that's one aspect. But then the underlying tools to help monitor that, if someone then comes and says, delete my data, how are you keeping track of all that in an easy way? And obviously, because what happens is you may have, and this is just from experience, right? We could have certain applications and certain things that are part of our stack that we're currently using, but we have other ones that we're no longer using, but we don't want to delete it per se. It's still there, but we're kind of shifting towards another direction. And what happens, especially for smaller teams, you just lose track of it, but you don't want to delete it just yet, because it's a whole thing about, let's not just delete things, right? We have to that's a whole conversation needs to happen. And now, I see that the potential ramifications of it based on what you described of not doing that. So I find that very, very interesting. So, I personally, man, I love doing these shows because the audience learns, and I'm like so curious about these things, and talking to various experts like yourself about topics that I might not high level know, but haven't really drilled down in. Yeah. So I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this. It's just, I find it extremely interesting, because even from the whole having a data intelligence tool, and looking at some of those things, based on, like you said, parameters, a lot of, maybe some fintechs as smaller ones may not fit the parameters that they're going to get hit by these privacy laws, or have to accommodate, like a CCPA. But, when you start moving towards, more of the incumbents, or the firms, like you said, that's been around for a while, that haven't really thought about privacy, now they have to bolt it on after the fact. I can see how that could be extremely challenging.
Yeah, and one thing I thought of as you were saying this, I didn't mention, is think of your enterprise clients, right? Your contract with them is going to have all kinds of stuff in there about making sure you're complying with privacy laws, right? So do you want to lose that client? Because they can audit you. They can come in and audit you. Most of these enterprise deals say they can come in and audit you. In the old days, it was all about cybersecurity, and making sure that your firewall was good, and you had all sort of these tools that prevented DDoS and everything else. But they now can come in and look at show me a sample deletion request and how you handled it. I guess we'll give that to you in a couple of days, and then you go behind, you do one, right, and you backdate it. I mean, I'm not saying you should do that, but I mean, imagine, right? Just imagine. So that's another risk where that, it may not lead to an attorney general investigation, but it could lead to either a contract termination where you lose $2 million a year, or they force you to do it and you have a very compressed timeline to get quote unquote compliant, and now you're scrambling around. So again, like avoiding all those disruptions, and forget how you looked at them. In fintech, all these giant banks and investment houses, like they're all ahead of this stuff. They get it because they've been compliant for 50 years. They've had to deal with all these laws. So to them it's just another thing to worry about, but they'll do it. These young fintechs that want to grow and prosper and get their MVP out and get one pillar client that they can shout out to the world that I do business with so and so. I think it'll last long if they start asking those questions. So it's attention, and I get it. Like, I'm not saying you need to spend $5 million a year up front on privacy programs, but what you can do if you're building or you're growing is look at the data you use and minimize it. Like you said, the old technology you don't want to throw away. If the data is not being used, get rid of it. If you don't permission for it, get rid of it. If you can't account for it, get rid of it. Because the less you have out there, the less you have to worry about. And keep it central to your business. And that way you can always define. Because one thing I will say about these laws is there is a certain degree, I wouldn't count on it, but there's a certain degree of good faith compliance. This was accidental. This was a bug, not a feature. You might get some time to cure before they throw the hammer down on you. So,
just the dog ate my homework.
Yeah, I mean, basically, right? Why'd you leave your homework on the ground is the question. But, it's not like you did it on purpose. So there's some of that. So it's just, a conversation you don't want to have, if you can help it.
Listen, I want to get into some other questions. Before we do, we have to take a moment from our sponsors, and then we'll be right back.
Are you an emerging fintech with a limited budget seeking more sales and partners? Introducing Strategic Generation, your partner in leveraging cybersecurity for sales and partner enablement. Fintechs often lose opportunities due to unsophisticated cybersecurity programs. That's where we come in. Strategic Generation assists with due diligence, security posture visibility, penetration testing, and on-demand virtual CISO services. We connect your systems to our partnered platform, and voila! Instant access to real-time diagnostics and compliance frameworks such as SOC 2 and PCI DSS. Gain the confidence of prospects and partners. Strengthen your cybersecurity program and drive success. Stop losing deals due to cybersecurity. Visit strategicgeneration.com and click on Demand CISO to connect with an expert.
Just like that, we are back. So one of the things that I do when I talk to fintechs, right, or work with them, especially ones without a huge budget, we leverage a lot of open source tools. So talking about what you mentioned with shift left and talking about something like DevSecOps, there's like something called within Git. There's something called Git Actions, and it's an automated process where you connect to certain tools and you can run security scans. Like, they're like OWASP, for instance, has a OWASP Zap tool. So you can run some sort of dynamic application security test, right? Are there similar things that exist in the privacy space? So you basically leverage these open source free tools to run scans or do something of that nature?
I'm not aware of, I'm sure there are. I'm not aware of any particular open source scanning tools. I know of some private ones, but off the top of my head, I just don't know. I think you always have to be careful what the rights are when you use open source software. So, what gets exposed by doing that? I think it's a probably minor risk, but you just have to sort of read those licenses carefully when you're engaging them, because if they're platforming, if you're running any sensitive data through them, what are they doing with it? How is there any sort of exposure there? It's like, the rush to use AI now, there's going to be a lot of problems coming because of the way that, there's a stupid example, but this lawyer not too long ago wrote a brief, and he used AI to create citations and create the whole brief, and includes all legal citations. There were two problems. One is some of them were hallucinated. So, I mean, they were made up. They don't exist. So they weren't actual court cases. And the lawyer was too, let's say, naive, I'll use a kind word, to double check his work. But two, by using those tools, he likely exposed client confidential information in doing so. And so he unknowingly was using an AI. He thought it was just using a large language model, and he thought he was just kind of creating stuff. But that's the problem that's going to be coming, is when you start exposing your systems to AI systems, it's going to be taking, they're going to grab everything. Those systems are just going to grab, they consume data on such an immense scale, as we all know, because you need all that data. You need, 10 million records to create 70% reliability, right? So if you're going to be running AI systems or open, it's different open source, but along the same lines, you can have a lot of unknowing exposure of confidential data to those systems. And once it's out there, you can't grab it back.
Yeah. So, there was an article I came across maybe last year sometime. Well, not maybe, definitely last year sometime, in which I don't want to list the company, but essentially their developers were leveraging OpenAI to help them with some code and so forth. But in doing so, they had to submit the existing code that they had, which is actually proprietary information. Yeah. So now that proprietary information is in OpenAI's large language model database along with something else. So now what's the repercussion of that? Someone asks a question regarding that company or something of that nature, that data can now be used. So, that's a potential problem. You brought up, it's just like, I know we're almost at time for the show, but you brought up AI. So now I'll kind of dive into it in respects to privacy. Besides the large language model aspect, are there anything else that you see with that technology that might impact privacy or companies should look out for?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious one is sort of the misuse or exposure of confidential or sensitive data. You're gonna, one of the big discussions in AI is bias, right? So do you sort of perpetuate existing biases in the training data that you use to create a model? So if you are, you might start to position your technology in a way that you don't want to. Is that a privacy thing? Maybe, maybe not. I think, you have to sort of look at, are those things up to speed on the regulations that you're dealing with? Are they compliant, right? I mean, are they by themselves compliant with those laws? I really harken back to sort of, there's too much data being consumed. And if you're not careful in what you're feeding it, then I think you just open that Pandora's box. So I think people, everybody wants to use AI to save time and money, right, and make things more efficient. But the human in the loop concept of AI needs to be maintained for all purposes, but privacy particularly, because you want to have somebody analyzing the data you're feeding it. You want to make sure the purpose that you're using it for is ethical and appropriate, right? You don't want to, for example, some AI models can reverse engineer anonymized data sets and figure out who it belongs to. I mean, it's crazy. Like they can, because they're working so fast, these neural networks are just, blitzing through the data at the speed we can't imagine. They can take a couple things like, oh, this person lives in, Queens and has this healthcare issue, and now it might be down to 5 people. When you thought, oh, no one's going to figure this out, but they can sort through the data so fast. So you need a human there to sort of manage these processes and make sure that the data you're using to test and train is appropriate. So I think there's a lot of use cases that remain out there for humans to make sure that the AI is used ethically, compliance with the laws, and you have these unknowing things popping up because it's just, the machine's just going to do what you tell it to do.
No, I mean, look, that's a really good point. I like to, we always say this when sort of people come on, you know, we consider you now a friend of the show. You are our resident privacy expert. This is the actual first. So you are the 159th show, and in all of these conversations, we've never touched upon privacy in this level.
This is my point. My point, Nagi. Nobody thinks about it. So it's too late. All they want to talk about is the cool stuff, you know.
No, dude, this is cool stuff, man. Look, I think this is extremely cool. I mean, look, because here's the thing with when you say cool stuff, like in general, right? Like people look at it and like go, "Oh, privacy is boring." But when you now flip it and you use a real world example, like these class action suits that you're standing to make, $2 off of, right? But the law firm doing it is going to make a few million,
right.
Then it's like, oh, that's why I was getting that letter in the mail. Light bulb moment, right? And then from a company perspective, we weren't really thinking about privacy, right? We have our go-to-market strategy. We have all these things going for us. And then boom, you get a delete request and you're like, the hell is this? Delete. All right, send it to your, forward it to the CTO. He forwards it to someone from operations. The data's deleted. Let's not think about it. And all of a sudden, that same person is getting a solicitation for your widget. And then you're getting a legal notice in the mail. You violated this random guy's data. And then other users are getting emails saying, hey, if you were affected by blah, 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 blah,
right.
you might. So then it's like, then it becomes really cool and really real, man.
Yeah.
So I love it. I think it's awesome that companies should be aware of this, man. And you are a resident privacy expert. So when things come up in the media and we want to learn more about it or just seek to understand it, want to call you on back for an ad hoc show and just drill into it.
No, I'd be happy to. I mean, one of the things I'm doing right now, my own mini commercial, is I partner with a friend who's a colleague. He's a software developer. He's an agile coach. He's worked for decades in software development. He's worked with Google and others on really teaching how to do agile. And so we partner together, and we're putting out articles every week. And we just started this past Monday, actually, to talk about the shift left philosophy. And we're tackling it from my angle, which is the legal privacy, and his angle, which is software development, agile practices. And our goal is to help companies understand how to do this, whether they're early stage, mid stage, or even later stage. And it's all about culture. That's why this is titled what it is. If you don't have the cultural buy-in from the exec team, it doesn't matter how smart you are, how scary the situation is. They have to believe in it, and you have to start with that in mind. And then you circle back around and you go to the contributors that are building the stuff, and you work with them and say, this is not scary. It's just a business requirement, like everything else you have when you're mapping out what you're going to do. And let's get to it. So it's very doable. It takes some effort, but it's all very doable.
And I think that might be a good future episode where I'll bring both of you on and we kind of just have that conversation from a developer standpoint, from a privacy standpoint. So what we've been doing for our guests is I'm going to give you the platform right now, and I'm going to get off of the stage so you can talk about what you're doing, how people can find you, your business, your websites, your blogs, whatever you want to. And I'm going to give you that moment. So it's your time.
Great. Hi, all. 10 of you, 12 of you, hopefully more. But thanks for watching if you've made it this far. Like I said, I've been a lawyer for quite a while now, working in the tech space, and most recently in the software development space for over 10 years, directly, and before that as a part of the law firm indirectly. The passion that I have around this is really how to make privacy palatable and productive and protective. So 3 Ps in this case for companies. You can look at my LinkedIn profile, which is just Jason Reiser, LinkedIn. So I have my name, full name on there. And I'm working with a gentleman named Gary Cohen, who's a longtime software developer and agile coach. And we created a little nameplate called Privacy Forge Strategies. We have a Substack, and we're publishing articles every Monday. We did our first this past Monday, which is really introducing the concept of shift left and kind of creating the culture of privacy. And then we're going to tag team it from development side, legal side, development side, privacy side, and really bring you kind of hopefully the best of both worlds and give some practical explanations and tips on how to do this. We'll start off kind of basic as we build it, and then we've already written about 7 or 8 articles we have in the pipe, so we're ready to go. We're excited about it. I really enjoy working with companies, helping them understand all things technical, not just privacy, but all the issues that they face from a risk perspective, from a growth perspective, leadership perspective. I've done all those things, so really enjoy it. Love working with my counterparts in various fields, whether it's tech or marketing, product development. Love all of that. So thank you for the time. Appreciate it. Hope everybody has a good weekend.
No, that sounds excellent. Hey, Jason, so what we can do is if you want to put that website in the chat, I could make it part of the show.
Okay.
And it'll be a part of the video so people can know where to go. So we can do that right now.
Yeah, let me just copy that. So this is our Substack where we're creating the articles. And then I can give you my LinkedIn if that helps.
All right, so what I'm gonna do is I just added Jason's Substack to the show, and hold up, let me and boom, it's right there. So yeah, Substack.com, privacy forage strategy. So you guys see it, and you could now it's part of the show forever. Jason, thank you very much for your time today. Mm-hmm. Really insightful conversation. I definitely appreciate it. Like I said, you're a friend of the show, so we'll schedule future conversations that we want to drill into further topics around privacy, and also maybe add your colleague in so we can get a good show and different perspective. To everyone watching, thank you very, very much for watching it. Your comments, definitely appreciate everything. As you know, Tech Behind FinTech, we go live every Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Look for us next week. It's going to be an interesting conversation next week about climate change and how banks can help. So that was going to be a very interesting conversation. Yeah. Had a good one. So look forward to that next week at 12 p.m. Today's episode, you can find us once again, Tech Behind FinTech, and look at today's episode and other episodes we've done. And I always say this, thank you for watching it. If you're watching it live, if you're going to be watching it tomorrow, or if you watch us a year from now, because we're on the internet now and we're not going to delete this. So thanks again. Have a very awesome weekend. Jason, thanks again, man.
Andy, great to see you. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.